My name is Bill Morgan. I'm from the Pacific Northwest National Lab in eastern Washington State in the USA. Committee 1 fully supports the ICRP mission. And as Claire said, we believe our goal is to advance for the public benefit of science and radiological protection by providing recommendations and guidance on all aspects of protection against ionizing radiation. And we are one of the 5 committees under the auspices of the main commission, and our focus is on radiation effects. And what I would like to take you through today is some of the philosophy for C1, some of the things we do and why we do it, and some of our accomplishments and our future. So as Claire said, ICRP does not go right back to the basic science. What they do is they review the large reports from groups such as Unscared. And we look at our role based on science, value, judgments, and our experience in pulling the diversities, the inconsistencies, and all the subtleties of science together to come up with rational recommendations for radiation protection. We pass these recommendations to other bodies to do with as they see fit. So we're like the middle of the road, if you will, to try and pull the disparities together, come up with a cohesive series of recommendations. So this is my C1 committee of 2012. The 2 gentlemen on the left, Otsura and Jolyon, were guests at our meeting. But I'm very proud to say that 50% of the C1 members are female. They're not members just because they're female, they're members because they're the very best in their field. And we interact very well together. We have had a number of changes. The 2 individuals in blue, Fiona Stewart and Pinkon Zhao, have since left. And unfortunately, 3 of the members were unable to be with us, Sarah Darby, Nori Nakamura, and Richard Wakeford, and they are missing from this photo. Now, as a result of the open elections, we slightly expanded Committee 1 to reflect what we believe are the tasks ahead of us. And I have listed the members here. You'll see where they are from, and if they have an asterisk by their name, they are a new member. So we have 7 new members here now. And you are very welcome to go on the website. You'll see photos of all these individuals and a brief CV outlining their interests, their areas of expertise, and the other committees that they are involved in. And these will be regularly updated on the C1 website. Now, this is the mission of C1. We consider the risk of induction of cancer and heritable disease together with the underlying mechanisms, or the so-called stochastic effects, both for cancer and heritable disease. We also consider the risk, severity, and mechanisms of tissue and organ damage and developmental effects. And our emphasis is very, very, very focused on low doses. We know a lot about high doses, but we're very interested in doses of 100 millisievert or less. And this is why. Because we know from numerous studies that you can extrapolate in a relatively linear fashion from doses above about 200 milligray. But there is some very exciting biology that suggests there are a number of effects that may shift this response up from a linear response. There's evidence for a linear response, and there's compelling evidence that there may be less than linear responses at low doses. And there are even increasing information starting to come out that a little bit of radiation may be good for you, or the so-called hormesis. And we try to be objective and look at all the data for all these different effects and come up with rational recommendations for the ICRP. And I think we've done a really good job on this in the past. And if you look at report 99, and I've underlined it here, you'll see that they say, we acknowledge there are things going on in biology, and that a simple extrapolation may not be justified in all cases. And the recommendation is, tell us what's going on, make us understand the mechanisms, or help us understand the mechanisms, which is really valuable recommendation for those of us that are basic scientists that work at universities or research labs and don't deal with the regulatory implications. So how do we try and achieve this? We have expertise on C1 where we continue to monitor the data from the survivors of the atomic bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We consider the biology of dose responses, and we look at models, and models is one of the big things we're looking at now. What is the right model to understand radiation effects? Is it cells growing on a plastic dish? Is it a little hairy mouse? Is it a monkey? Or should we be taking bits and pieces of humans? And how do we translate that into risk recommendations? And we follow very closely the various groups in the world studying low-dose effects, the big US DOE low-dose program, the EU programs, MELODY, OPERA, Do-Re-Mi, EPI-RAD-BO, and the exciting programs out of Japan, Korea, and India. So we are aware of these, and we have expertise on our committee to deal with these. So we do review the documents that come out from Unscared, and we are very fortunate that 8 of our 16 members currently on the committee are delegates to Unscared. So we have a really good feel for the discussions at Unscared, and then we can help take these the next step. And we have made it a focus in C1 to really start to integrate dosimetry, epidemiology, current biology, and all these exciting new technologies. And I want to come back and talk about that in a minute. One of the things we're going to focus on our meeting here this week are variation in human radiation sensitivities. And this is a reflection of a recent report from HPA on human radiation sensitivity and in individual radiosensitivities. And I use this when I'm teaching my students, because we all have a different perception of risk, and we all probably respond differently to radiation. And here's a photo from one of the local newspapers of a lady who's clearly pregnant, and she's outside, and she's worried about the sound of jackhammers on her unborn baby. And what is she doing outside? She's smoking a cigarette. Okay? So these are different perceptions, and we keep getting asked all the time, can we detect radiation-sensitive individuals? Technology is moving. And this raises a number of legal and ethical questions that we will interact with Committee 4 on. For example, NASA called us and said, we want to do a 2-year space mission. We're going to get 4 gray of high Z particles. Our astronauts should be radio resistant. We don't want to send sensitive people up there that might be at risk. And these are the types of things that soon, with individualized medicine, we will be able to detect these individuals. We can't currently, but we should start planning for the future on how we might deal with these types of things. We follow closely the discussion on dose rate effect and dose rate effect factors. We have expertise in cellular responses to exposure to radiation, DNA damage recognition, repair processes, and how these might be modified by epigenetic effects. We look at long-term effects, not just the immediate effects. What are these immune responses that may ultimately lead to non-cancer effects and we have a strong dialogue and a number of people who are experts in heritable effects. So let me tell you some of the work that C1 has done. The task group produced report 64 on cancer risks from alpha emitters. This was chaired by Margot. The main commission approved this task group in 2006. It began in 2007, and the report was completed in 2010. Now, the goal was to reconcile the ICRP 1993 document and the recent, or the more recent, Unscared document to various approaches for dose conversion. And I put in the timing here because, as Claire said, we all have day jobs. We do this in our so-called spare time. And so it's a credit to Margot's leadership and the hard work of the committee that this was accomplished in a reasonable amount of time. And publication 115 has been very popular. So Margot has extended this task group, and they are going to produce a report in the future on other alpha emitters, plutonium, uranium, thoriumide, and radium. There's publication 118, the tissue reactions report, early and late effects of radiation. This was chaired by Fiona Stewart, and you can read the committee members here, but I'm not going to say much about that because this is going to be the focus of the C1 symposium this afternoon. Now, this is going to be a fantastic symposium. We're going to deal with the biology of tissue reactions, cardiovascular effects, effects of the lens of the eye. And we have a number of our liaison organizations have come in, and they're going to tell us about some of the implications of these recommendations. So the time, I think, is 12:45. It's in your book. All the speakers, can you please be there and have everything loaded up? You'll note it's a tight schedule, but we'd like to give everybody their 10 minutes. And at the end of that, we will have time for a panel discussion on trying to put all this together so we can see what do our recommendations mean and how do they impact on all of you. Task Group 75 is on stem cell radiobiology, probably one of the hottest areas in radiation biology, in that how do we translate what we know about stem cells, the radiobiology of stem cells, into cancer risk. And this is a task group co-chaired by Jolyon Henry and Otsuru Niwa. They discussed this at length with the main commission at this meeting and with C1 yesterday afternoon. The document is well advanced, but there are still some issues that need to be resolved. And we work hard to get those done and get this report out in a timely fashion. Now we have two new task groups that were approved late last year by the main commission. The first is on radiation risk inference at low dose and low dose rate exposure for radiological protection purposes. It will be chaired by Werner Ruhm from Helmholtz in Germany. You can see we have active members, mainly from C1. We have corresponding members from other committees, and I am very pleased that my colleague and mentor, Abel Gonzalez, has agreed to work as a consultant with us on this project. And the goal here is to reanalyze the information on estimation of risk coefficients and recommend, one, whether it's desirable to continue to estimate risk at low doses by assessing the slope of the dose response curve and then applying a dose and dose rate reduction factor, and whether such coefficients are applicable to acute, protracted, and prolonged exposures, or do they need correction. And this is going to be a very important task group, and I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how this develops in light of all the activities going on worldwide in this area. A second task group called Terminology and Definitions has also been established, and this is one I will chair. You can see it contains at least one representative from each of the 5 ICRP committees. We have corresponding members from 2 of our liaison organizations, and Arbel has agreed again to be a consultant with us on this, as has Jackie Lee from the main commission, who will actually be a full member. Now, this group will meet on Wednesday when the morning session breaks up, and it will be in the C1 room, which is just down here. It will be a brief meeting because none of us will have had our lunch, but we'd like to get this process started as soon as possible. And our goal to do this is that we've noticed that over the years, many of the recommendations and definitions that involve terminology have changed, they've evolved. And we would like to make this consistent within the various task groups. So the task group will work in 2 ways. First, we will take all those terms and definition that we sort of agree on and just make sure that we still agree and they're updated. And the second phase will be to take those terms and definitions where we don't agree or there are inconsistencies, resolve those inconsistencies and make these available. These will be available on the web, and I had some interesting discussions yesterday with people about saying, what about the translations of these? If they're translated, is that things lost in translation? And Arbel's input here after Task Group 84 and what we learned from radiation protection recommendations in Fukushima are going to be most helpful here as we move forward in the future. The next meeting of C1 will be in Beijing. The dates will not be May 27 to 30, because as I learned yesterday, that coincides with the Unscared meeting and the ESTRO meeting, so half my committee may not be available. So the dates may change, and Ping Kon Zhao, a former member of C1, and Quan Fu Sun, a new member of C1, Hua Lu, a new member of the main commission, and I will try and get this resolved this week if we can. Keep you informed so that if our liaison organizations want to attend, we can give you that information. I will be available the next few days for any questions, or if you have any now, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you.